So last Sunday, we were with the first and the second of the patriarchs, Abraham and his son Isaac. Sarah and Abraham were the first people with whom God had made a holy covenant, a promise, a pact. I will be your God, you will be my people. And to you I will give descendants more numerous than the stars in the sky. I will give you land, and through you, Abraham and Sarah, and through the people who will come from you and our covenant together, through them shall I bless all the nations of the world. This is a hefty promise, especially given that Abraham and Sarah were octogenarians by the time this promise was made, and childless. So Isaac really was a miracle baby. Aren't they all miracles? Even out of a barren womb, out of death, God provides. God can be trusted to provide. Isaac's name, we heard last week in Monica's story, Isaac's name means laughter, because what else can you do but laugh at the thought of an 80-year-old couple having a baby? And then, as we heard last week, something strange happened, something involving sacrifice and death, and presumably proving one's fealty. But Abraham, I think, was in on it. Just at the moment when he raised his knife to sacrifice the flesh of his flesh and bone of his bone, God stopped his hand. This God who can be trusted, this God who provides, this God, unlike Molech and countless other false gods, this God doesn't require human sacrifice. And while historically we have been relieved for poor Abraham and Isaac, I actually think the elder patriarch was in on it. He knew. He'd go through the motions, but he knew this God was different and could be trusted to provide the sacrifice. Wait here, he said to his servants. Wait here at the foot of the hill. We're going up the mountain to worship God and make a sacrifice. Then we'll be right back. Wink. Where other gods and idols demand from us, and drive up our anxiety and play with our mortality, this God is driven by love and justice and grace and peace. God provides, and God can be trusted. Well, Isaac eventually grew up and found himself a wife who, like her mother-in-law Sarah, was no wallflower. Rebecca is a fascinating character, by the way, in her own right, and she deserves your attention beyond the honorable mention that she is getting in my message this morning. Isaac and Rebecca, the new holders of the covenant with God, fell pregnant with twins, as Monica mentioned. Her pregnancy was difficult. Genesis 25, verse 22 says that the twins struggled, raged within her, and she wondered if she was even going to survive carrying them, which is probably how Connie feels right about now, since yesterday was her due date, and she's still pregnant. It was during this that God gave Rebecca a glimpse of the future. The two children in her womb would represent two nations. One nation would be stronger than the other, and the elder twin would serve the younger one. This prophecy contravened cultural practice, which dictated that the birthright goes to the eldest son of a household. So if nothing else, the authors of Genesis were masters of foreshadowing. The boys grew, and though they were twins, they were as different from one another as night is from day. Esau was outdoorsy, a hunter, a burly man's man. Jacob was quiet, a thinker, creative, and preferred to keep closer to home, more of a Renaissance man of sorts. Widening the divide between the brothers, their parents made the cardinal error of each choosing a twin as their favorite. Father Isaac loved Esau, and Mother Rebecca loved Jacob. This never, ever, ever ends well. Don't do it. I have a small side note So if you are a fan, I could have cut this out of my sermon, but I couldn't. If you're a fan of the Marvel Universe, this is for you. If you aren't into superhero lore, you can go make another cup of coffee, and you can come back in a minute. So someone in a preaching group, preaching resource group that I'm part of, recently made the connection between Esau and Jacob and Thor and Loki. Now listen. Ignore the fraternal twins versus adopted brother difference and just consider the burly black and white thinking of Thor to Loki's mischief, scheming, and trickery. Right? Thor, beloved of Father Odin, Loki, beloved of Mother Frigga. I cannot unsee this, folks. I have nothing else to add. There's no weight in that to the sermon at all. I just can't unsee it, so I had to share it with you. Okay, hopefully you got your coffee and you're back. The shorthand of their adolescence is that Jacob tricks his brother Esau out of both his birthright as the eldest and of his blessing. Naturally, Esau was furious when he discovered his brother's treachery. Father Isaac wasn't too pleased either. Thankfully, Mother Rebekah caught wind of her eldest's fury and advised Jacob to flee to her brother Laban's household. Isaac, too, tells Jacob to hit the road. Choose a wife from among your uncle's family. Just get out and stay away from here. You think your family's dysfunctional. Yes, Jacob now had the blessing of Abraham and Isaac. But did it ever come at a high price? He had become a fugitive, banished from the safety and security of their tribe. And so that's the scene we're in when we get to Genesis 28. Jacob is a dead man on the run. He has, after all, swindled both his brother out of his birthright and his brother's blessing out of their doddering dad. Esau's promise to kill him as soon as their dad kicked the bucket fuels this cheater's mad dash for safety. And ironically, this has meant abandoning the very inheritance, the land, and grain and new wine that he and his mama had hustled out of their family. And his destination, not especially safe either. His uncle Laban was a known deceiver and a hard taskmaster himself, which Jacob would soon discover. Biblical scholar Bruce Waltke says it this way. He describes Jacob as being situated between a death camp and a hard labor camp. He is in no man's land. He's out in the wild, in enemy territory, without kith or kin for protection. And now it's getting dark. The time when nocturnal predators come out to play with unsuspecting prey. Wild cats, bears, and hyenas. Now comes the danger of dusk's shadows and night's darkness. How he managed to sleep at all is a wonder. People today are still on the run. And while your mind might rightfully drift to refugees fleeing Afghanistan or Haitian asylum seekers, I would like to go on record saying that while it may seem less overt, there's still a lot of running happening within and around each of us every day, too. You and the people around you might not be on the dead run literally, but it's likely that you and the people around you are figuratively on the run. Perhaps we are running from bad memories. Perhaps we're running from memories of past abuse or neglect, failure, bad choices and disappointment. Perhaps we are fleeing a faithless friend or a scorned lover, an angry boss or a judgmental coworker. Putting distance between us and them at any cost. Perhaps we're on the dead run from bad credit, bad job performance, overdue debt, or worsening health. Perhaps we're running from making difficult choices for ourselves or loved ones. Running from a feeling of guilt or shame. Running from the inevitability of loss and change. Sometimes the thing we are running from is beyond our control. Other times, the thing we're trying to outrun is just the consequences of our own actions. Running from pain and towards escape. Not even safety sometimes, just away. Escaping somewhere, taking a trip, escaping through a bottle or a new distraction, a binge, or an online shopping spree. And here's where we might be able to relate to dear Jacob, because fleeing and running, escaping is exhausting. His collapse on the ground is not unimaginable to us. Fear of being caught by someone or something drives you like the crack of an angry whip. But we can only hold that surge capacity, that ability to draw on mental and physical adaptive systems in order to survive acutely stressful situations. We can only harness that for so long. Fleeing danger, whether real or perceived, whether physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, it drains so much time and energy and attention. Jacob is so exhausted from running that a stone makes a comfortable enough pillow on which to collapse his weary body. While he's awake, writes Walter Brueggemann, Jacob's world is one of fear and terror, loneliness, and likely a heaping pile of guilt. Sleep, however, allows another reality to slip into his life. Oblivion, just for a little while. He needed it so desperately. Don't we? Don't so many of us need that body and soul sleep that can truly recharge our systems? And then Scripture tells us that while he is asleep, Jacob slips into a very vivid dream. He sees in his dream what some translations call a ladder, though it was probably more like a ramp or a stairway, a ziggurat, that connects heaven to earth. A stairway to heaven, one might say. On this stairway, angels are ascending and descending. And you know what that means? That means an escape route. I mean, Carl Jung would have had a heyday with Jacob, feeling stressed and scared, and then you start dreaming of ladders and stairs and exit signs from the earthly plane, escape hatches covered in angelic legions, and let's not even consider what Freud might make of all this. Of course, Jacob dreams of a stairway out of his reality. Could you blame him? I wonder, though, if while Jacob might have at first been caught up in the vision of an escape, as the dream continued to take shape for him, he might have noticed a few things. First of all, he might have noticed that the beings on the stairs were not humans. No people were going up and down between earth and heaven. This was a highway for angelic beings, for messengers. And I wonder if perhaps Jacob would have come to the realization at this point that actually earth is not left to its own devices, and that heaven isn't closed off for the gods. This liminal, this thin place showed poor, scared Jacob that actually there really isn't too much between here and there and here. Rub your eyes and you can see it. You've actually seen it. You've seen it, standing on the shores of a great body of water. You've seen it on a clear night sky, lying out on the dock, seeing a sky covered in stars. You've heard it in the laugh of a loved one who had been on death's door and had miraculously recovered. You've heard it in a concerto and in a baby's cry. That stairway, that touching place where angels trod, and here and there and there and here are not so far apart after all. It was only when Jacob was able to stop and be still, to breathe, let go, even succumb to sleep, that he was able to see how thin the veil is between us and them, here and there and here. That stairway had been there all along, but when we're on the run, we can only see our predator. And notice one other thing, which I believe was the most startling point for dear Jacob. Notice where God was. God was not at the top of the stairwell, as some Bibles have improperly translated it. God was not up there. God was right here, right beside Jacob, in the wilderness, in the wilds, in the place between a death camp and a hard labor camp, in the fear. I picture him, fingers tracing in the dirt and the dust of the ground. That's where God was, right beside Jacob and right beside us. That's good news. It's no wonder then that Jacob seems to only slowly awaken from his dream. Wouldn't it be nice to just stay there forever? As he does so, as he returns to consciousness, Jacob recognizes that his makeshift campsite is nothing less than the house of God. His grandpa and his dad's God, the God of Abraham and Isaac, doesn't live at the top of some temple people built with human hands. Their God is present even in the very place where someone sleeps in the world that God created. Jacob had thought of his campsite as just a place where he could bed down for the night on his sprint towards safety. Jacob had thought of himself as alone in his fight to save his own life. That makes Jacob's campsite actually like a lot of places that God's people find ourselves. We think of our homes as just places where we live. Work sites as just the places where we work. Parks as just the places where we play. Churches as just the place we worship. Yet God's encounter with Jacob reminds both him and us that God is present in those places, even when we don't recognize that presence. God's encounter with Jacob reminds us that we're never alone and that we never have to make it on our own. Consider that when he awakes, Jacob declares the fact that the Lord is in, not above, in this place, in the fear, in the run, in the desperation, in the escape. There is no place we can run where God will not be right there beside us. And I don't know about you, but I've had to cling to and trust this promise, especially over the last 18 months. Friends, we know what it's like to be on the run from others, on the run from ourselves, on the run from sad and painful feelings, on the run from change, on the run from confusion, on the run from truth that's too hard to hear. We know what it's like to want to flee and to escape, to just get on a plane and go somewhere, anywhere, to change jobs or change addresses or change relationship status, anything to change the landscape of our lives. And we know what it's like to distract ourselves from our fear. But Jacob's story reminds us what it looks like to sink into stillness, to close our eyes and breathe. And then even when we at first visualize our escape plan, if we turn and look, we can see that God has been with us all along in this place. We don't have to be on the run. We're invited to be still and trust. Abraham and Isaac both had to learn this lesson. So did Jacob, and so do we. And so this week, may you find the ability to be still, to sink into the reality of our present moment, to resist the urge to run or escape. And when you do so, may you feel God's holy presence right beside you, right there, whispering blessing, whispering promise. This God can be trusted. Surely the Lord is in this place. To God be all the glory. Amen.